Hi, everybody. Dan Illman along with Ashley Mailloux, and it's a super card at Del Mar on Saturday. Two major graded stakes race that should have Breeders' Cup implications, including this one. Race number 10 is the Grade 1 Bing Crosby. 3/4 of a mile, some of the top sprinters on the West Coast. Let's take a look at this big, bulky field. It should be a great betting race, Ashley.
It should be an excellent betting race. Just looking at the morning line, you can see a couple horses at the 4-1 morning line price, 7-2. And then from there, some prices. And even the prices are horses that in graded stakes events, they've certainly held their own. I thought this race was absolutely phenomenal, top to bottom. Even you get some of the old timers like CZ Rocket, who's a hard knocking type, Sibelius, who is so good overseas in Dubai. The Chosen Braun against California Breds has been sensational. And then the bigger names, maybe Spirit of McKenna and Dr. Scheibel towards the outside. Could talk about basically every runner in the field, Dan.
And you can make a case for most of them as well, including the last two winners of the Bing Crosby. The 11, Dr. Schivel, won it in 2022. Remember, American Theorem won it in 2021. Let's start things out with the number 1, Hoist the Gold, coming off a sharp win at Ellis Park, going 7/8 of a mile. This horse is no slouch on his best day. He earned a Grade 1 placing 3 starts back, and look who he ran second to, Cody's Wish. He's rock solid. He lacks that signature win. Maybe it comes in the Bing Crosby on Saturday.
The first time he's going to go to the 6 furlong distance in quite some time as well. He's been more at the 7 furlong, primarily probably in his last several starts. But he did have that try in the Metropolitan Handicap 2 back and just didn't fare well. I mean, he was forwardly placed and tired in there. And you mentioned was second to Cody's Wish, then was 8th in the same race as him. But curious to see him shorten up. Like I said, it's been a while. And Dallas Stewart typically prices in these big races, but his horses, they tend to hold their own as well.
Now, it is worth noting that this Ellis Park meet, speed's been holding up very well. Hoist the Goal was a pace-pressing winner of that allowance race last time out. Maybe he was helped by the track just a bit. He'll be a great price on Saturday. Spirit of McKenna has been really well handled by his connections. This is a lightly raced 5-year-old. They've had to nurse him along, and he's rewarded them for their patience. He's won 4 of 5, including this race, the Grade 2 Triple Bend, going 7/8. This was a carbon copy of the San Carlos's win 2 starts back, where he sat off Forbidden Kingdom and he ran right by him.
He was favored here, and just to see how easy this win ends up being for him, I think really speaks to his talent. And as you've alluded to, Dan, very patient with this horse. They've had to, be patient along the way, but I love that they've taken their time. They tried Grade 3 waters and the Grade 2, and now up to the Grade 1 level. And I think the way that he won his last out, he deserves to be in this race, and he deserves a lot of respect. The connections, as you mentioned, they've done a tremendous job with him so far.
He's going to cut back to 3/4 of a mile. He has had success at this distance. Maybe he'll be a little bit further back early, but the pace is expected to be fast. I want to quickly transfer to the Timeform US pace projector for this race if we get a chance. The pace should be fast. Peaceful Waters, the number 12 on the far outside, has speed. Sibelius, Kid Corleone. There is a lot of early zip in here, and it could set things up for a stalker or a closer. And Spirit of McKenna, you see by his number 2 Chicklet, is in mid-pack.
Going 6 furlongs, you'd expect speed, but in this Grade 1 event, as you've mentioned, even looking at the Timeform pace projections here, there is a ton of speed. I think that kind of makes this difficult as a handicapper. Not that speed can't hold, but a lot of these horses, when you go down the page, you've seen some sub 44 half miles as well. And I just think it adds to the level of complexity when trying to handicap this race.
And the horse with the fastest late pace rating from Timeform US is the number 6. Get her number. You see that by the LP flag over his Chicklet. Maybe he'll benefit from a fast pace up front. The 3 Todofino's going to get tested here. He was 3rd in his most recent start, the Grade 3 Smile Sprint, and I thought this was a useful performance. The pace was fast. It was his first start off of a lengthy layoff. He was placed on a hard chase, and he tired. I think he gained a lot of fitness from this run. The question I have is, does he class up to some of these?
This was a Grade 3 event, and Dean Delivers won as the betting public expected. And just looking at Dean Delivers, trained by Michael Yates, his record is very strong in South Florida with that runner. So Todofino finishes 3rd behind him. This is still a huge step up. Even if he would have won that race, I think this would be a huge class test for him. And I'm not sure he can kind of hang with these big horses. I mean, 6 furlongs last time, he did have to chase, which probably put him at a disadvantage. But I expect them to go potentially even quicker than we saw in that race at Gulfstream.
The number 4, the Chosen Braun, is just such a cool Calbred. He's won 7 in a row. He's good sprinting on dirt. He's good sprinting on turf. A lot of folks forget he's a graded stakes winner going 2 turns on the dirt. He won the Affirmed a while back, and he has wonderful tactical speed, as evidenced by this race in the Thor's Echo, where he set off the pace. He made a very strong attack on the outside. Look how confidently ridden he is being handled, and he just struts through the stretch very easily.
Much the best, and it looks like he might have scared away some opponents in that race as well, right? It was only a field of 4, and the last couple efforts he's been in, they have been compact fields, but regardless, you cannot knock how easy it looks here for him. Not called upon. He still ends up getting a 98 Beyer speed figure, and as we see on the graphic now, his best is a 103, which certainly is competitive against this group, better than several runners in here. The question is, they have made decisions along the way to keep him against his Calbred competition. And now we're going to see him in a grade 1. The last time we saw him in a graded stakes event, it didn't fare too well for him.
Do you think 4-1 is just a little bit light? That's his listing on the morning line. He's stepping up in class. We said all the good things about the Chosen Braun, and his merits are obvious on paper. But against this field, would you demand a little bit more?
I would. As I mentioned, kind of the path that they've taken with him and how they've managed him. I don't knock that at all. I mean, he is 4 for 4 this year, and I would love to own a horse that's 12 for 16 lifetime. We all would. But I think in the grade 1 waters, he hasn't proven himself. Last time, as I mentioned, in a graded stakes, he split that field. His numbers suggest he fits, but I'm not sure also what he's really faced in those last couple.
The number 5 is Kid Corleone, who returned off of a lengthy layoff with a successful 4-year-old debut. Let's watch this allowance race. And this horse is not exposed just yet. He's only run 6 times. He is a very lightly raced 4-year-old. And considering the layoff and the fact that he had to battle all the way around the track, I'm willing to give him some extra points.
I am too. I think he raced very nicely and kind of seeing the trip that he got from Hernandez towards the inside. It worked out well for him. It was certainly a night and day difference compared to what we saw last prior start in that grade 2, the sprint challenge race at Santa Anita. My question is this still a huge step up for him? And just looking at his 3 wins, he's been forwardly placed in all of them. We're not really sure if he's the type that can kind of sit and be patient in the early stages of a race and make a late move, but he also doesn't have a lot of race experience. So it's tough to draw conclusions just based on 6 starts.
But that is an excellent point. The pace is likely going to be very fast. It's likely going to be contested, probably faster than anything he's ever seen. I wish he was a little bit more smoother with his lead change. He did not do that in the stretch last time out. So this is a big test. If the pace falls apart, keep an eye on the number 6, Get Her Number, who ran second in the 2022 Cigar Mile and has sort of been finding his way in 2023. Just didn't really fire last time out in the Churchill Downs Stakes, going 7/8. The last time he ran 6 furlongs, he won. At one point, I thought it was going to be sharp for him. Maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not. And just looking at his races, when you go down the page, if we draw a line through that race last time out, he had 2 solid efforts. I can disregard the 1 1/8 race and a mile. We're not going anywhere near as far as those races. And look at his record at Del Mar. He's a horse that when you start to look at this field, there's a couple that have really done well at Del Mar. And we cannot disregard the fact that just about a year ago, he was second in this race, and he did get the pace set up that he needed. And once again, we think the pace is going to be hot. And looking at the fractions of last year's race, could it be hotter? I think it could be quicker early on, which you would think would set up for him. But this year, it's even a bigger field, and probably in terms of caliber, it is a deeper field.
The number 7 is Anarchist. He's very underrated. He's a graded stakes winner on synthetic. He's graded placed on dirt and turf. I got a really good look at him before the True North last time, and he's just a big, scopy, good-looking colt. He ran really well to be second that day behind champion Elite Power. No one was beating Elite Power that day, but Anarchist ran quite well.
Very, very well. Outran his odds, to say the least. And I thought the trip was very nice, and kind of talking about where you might want to be early on in this race. I wonder if Anarchist gets a good trip just off of it. If you look down the page, yes, when he went up at Woodbine 2 starts back, he was on the front end. But I'm very curious by him just about his running style. And you've mentioned very consistent. I know he's just 2 for 10, but I think if you're looking at the exotics here, he has the resume that suggests he is a major player.
The 8 is CZ Rocket. He's banked over $2 million in his career. He has twice finished second in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and now he's getting a cutback in distance that should benefit him. They took a shot last time out, stretching him back out in the Pleasanton Mile. He is at his best when he is a late-running sprinter with some pace in front of him, and he should get that here at a very generous morning line.
He absolutely should. And we, look at his past races, and I feel like he's the type of horse when you kind of disregard him or kind of discount him, he shows up. One of the prime examples would be when we go back to the Breeders' Cup a couple of years ago, and just looking at his performances in the Breeders' Cup over the time. He was second to Elite Power. Elite Power kind of gets forgotten about in some regards because of Cody's Wish, but Elite Power is extremely talented and a horse that has to be acknowledged in his presence. And I think looking at the efforts back in May at Santa Anita off a short rest, he raced well back to back. Could have been maybe a slight step up. I would have expected maybe in the Triple Bend because he had that prep and they wheeled him back so quickly. Maybe he had issues last time out. I'm going to draw a line through that race kind of on the fair circuit.
The number 9 is Sibelius, and he's been masterfully handled by trainer Jerry O'Dwyer, winning a graded stake at Gulfstream, winning at Tampa Bay, and then riding a golden rail and showing a lot of heart and determination in taking the Dubai Golden Shaheen. Now, last time out in the Aristides, that's a tough spot off of a very taxing trip overseas and back, and especially when you're facing the like of Gunite, I think he's going to do a lot better with that race under his girth.
And just kind of looking at that angle, Dan, when he came over to Churchill, he wasn't favored in that race. And I think the betting public might have had similar thoughts that maybe he'll need one. The shipping can be very taxing and difficult on these horses. And when you look at his race in Dubai, you want to talk about a monster effort. It was one of those performances that when you look at some of his other races, you weren't sure if he had that sort of grit and determination. And it, he really had to earn it in the end. It was such a big, impressive effort. So I'm willing to discount his last effort, draw a line through it, and hope that he can regroup. The question is, looking at the pace in here, he is very quick, but I do like in the past he has been able just to sit just off of whoever is really setting the fractions.
American Theorem was in career form at this point last year. He won the Bing Crosby. He ran second in the Pat O'Brien. And something tells me that things just haven't gone right for him since then. You'll note the long layoff then going into the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and he was a bit flat. After that race, they said he had some body soreness, and it took him out of his game for a good 6 or 7 months. I think he benefits from his last start where he was beaten by Kid Corleone, and I think it's a good sign that there's not another layoff, that he's back here to defend his title.
I think it is a good sign, and the connections do well with horses coming second off that long layoff. I think in this spot, just based on what we've seen in his last two, is it going to take him longer to get rolling, especially against this sort of caliber? I wish he would have ran a touch better in his first race off the layoff. I'm just wondering if the fitness still isn't there. He obviously, won this race last year and he had the opportunity to go back in it. So I do think his trainer expects a big effort and thinks that he's ready for this spot. But I think when I look at others in the field on the fitness edge, a couple or more, I guess, appealing based on their recent performances.
I'm a huge fan of the number 11, Dr. Shivel, a grade 1 stakes winner at 2, a grade 1 stakes winner at 3. He won the Bing Crosby that year against older horses, and then he took one of the cruelest beats in Breeders' Cup history when he dropped the sprint by a nose to a hard-charging Aloha West. He's had his share of physical problems as well, but he returned with no rust off the lengthy layoff 2 starts back. And I think in the Met Mile, he was just part of a fast and contested pace at a distance that's too far for him.
I agree. I don't think a mile suits him well. I'm just kind of looking at his previous races. He never went that far. There were reasons maybe they thought he had distance limitations, and very impressed with his first start off the long layoff. 6 months is long, but over a year is really tough. And I think it's really tough on sprinters. You not only have to be fast, but you have to, carry your speed for at least, in this case, it was 6 furlongs. And he just was very commanding in that performance. A career best buyer speed figure of a 105. And as you've mentioned, a consistent type who, suffered the very, very tough loss, but still, even in defeat, that effort will probably be one that stands out in his career.
The 12 is Peaceful Waters, and he might be the speed of the speed, making his first start for John Sadler. This horse was purchased at public auction after this race, a win and a second level allowance at Keeneland, and he showed his usual high speed in here, and he's kind of crying for the wire the last eighth of a mile, but he gets there gamely in front. He sold for $310,000 not long afterwards.
He certainly had to work for it in this race. It was his first start in quite some time, and maybe the 6.5 is just a tad long for him. So I do think the cutback to 6, even though it is ever so slight, really can make the difference in sprinters. But one that's going to get tested for class. You've mentioned the private purchase. To come out of a race like that and go into a grade 1, obviously they have high hopes for him, but it is a huge step.
Looking for a quick return on investment. Let's take a look at our top selections in here. And with all the choices, we landed on the same horse. Spirit of McKenna has been truly one of the better sprinters in all of Southern California and is certainly top 5 or 6 in the nation. I think if he can work out a good trip, and I think trips are going to be so important in this big and bulky field, you'll know him in the stretch.
I agree. I think trip is crucial. Also knowing that there are 12 horses in the starting gate, there's speed to the outside, some speed to the inside. I mean, everyone's going to have to be kind of fending for themselves in terms of getting that position. I just think Spirit of McKenna has the ability to sit off of it and make a nice late run, and has typically never been too far off of it.
And we both like Anarchist as a little bit of a price play. We love his consistency and his running style. 2-7-11-9 for Ashley, 2-7-4-11 for me. This is a sensational race. It's the grade 1 Bing Crosby at Del Mar on Saturday. Best of luck.